Hello, welcome to Lunch with Lee. Today's Thursday. We're talking about dryer vents. And a very, very important part of cleaning a dryer vent is double checking your work. Um, One of the things we do extraordinarily well, which is we take readings before we clean it and after we clean it from an actual, it's called a Magni-Helix gauge, but it's a back pressure gauge. And then we also do airflow on the outside. So we know how hard your dryer is working because that's what it measures back pressure. So if you're clogged up, it's not going to be able to get air to the outside, and the pressure will be very, very high. And then after we clean it out and we put a vacuum on the inside and we suck all the lint out, and we run a brush that spins all the way through, we run another test to see, is it working correctly? Because it is possible for it to be totally clean and not work. It could be crushed, it could be damaged, it could be too long, it could have too many turns. All that is possible also. So we know because once we run that brush through it, we can look through it, we can see it. It is perfectly clean. And then we can test to see how well your dryer vent is working. Then we can go to the outside and test how many feet per minute, meters per second, how much airflow do we have to the outside of the dryer. And we can tell between the two, how well is your vent working, regardless of length, regardless of anything else. So don't just trust someone who comes in, who runs a brush through and goes, okay, we cleaned it. The question is it working? And just looking at it, just going by experience, like, oh yeah, I can kind of tell. I can tell because we put a blower, there's a lot of airflow on the outside. Well, is it working up to what it should be? There's certain ways to test it. It's kind of like grabbing the tire on your car and kind of pushing on the tire and saying, does it have enough pressure? You really need a gauge to measure it to tell if it's correct or not. We do that. Not everybody does, but we have the ability, and that's what we do when it comes to dryer vents, is to make sure. And then the next time you call us, we know what good is for your vent, and we can test it beforehand and tell, how is it gotten worse? Is it the same? Because all the time we come back out and it's exactly the same as we were there the year before. And we can say, hey, look, we've inspected it. It's working exactly the same. Nothing has changed. I don't think you need to spend the money on cleaning. That happens. But it doesn't happen unless you go through and you actually do the gauges, you actually check it, you actually measure it, and scientifically know, is this good? Is it not good? Because homeowners can't tell by looking at it. We can't tell by looking at it. And I've looked at hundreds of thousands of dryer vents. So that's the lesson for today is you got to use gauges. You got to know. If a professional shows up at your house and they're not going to show you before and afters of what they've done and whether they've done it, and not pictures, but actually gauges that are measuring how well the dryer is working, that's what you really need to happen. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And we will see you next week.